Welcome to Night Shadows. I'm Stuart Best, where the paranormal is normal, where that which you thought you knew, you didn't, and where the future can be known if you know exactly where to look. Well, good evening, everyone. Thanks for tuning in and listening. And we have Larry with us on top of his mountain gathering a lot of news. Seemed very eerily quiet. Then all of a sudden, things begin to take shape. Anyway, hi, Larry. How are you doing?
Hey, Stuart. Thanks for having me.
Wars and rumors of war. Doesn't sound very good. I got a copy of your blog, and, well, it doesn't sound very, very good either. In fact, it sounds like we're headed into trouble of some sort. Where do you want to start?
Well, I want to pull one out of the hat here, and it wasn't even on my blog, but I wanted to get your opinion on this because late this evening, Joel Rosenberg, you know, he's a prolific author, and he moved recently to Israel, and he just posted out of Israel a really interesting news piece. He says, on the eve of Yom Kippur, Putin in Ankara to forge an alliance between Russia, Turkey, and Iran. He says, remember my book, people, the Ezekiel option? He says, possibly we're looking at Ezekiel 38 and 39, War of Gog and Magog.
Well, I wouldn't doubt that at all. I mean, look at it's on the Feast of Atonement, right? We are moving into something I don't think a lot of people realize. We are moving from one Jubilee to another Jubilee. And there are people out there saying, and it's growing as people realize what the Bible actually does say on Jubilees, that we could very well be still in 5777, but on Atonement, which they're already celebrating, I think, over there in Israel, they're moving into literally 5778. Now, 5777 was a Jubilee based on the 1967 war, and 2018 is also a Jubilee because of all the things that have gone on in the timeline of Israel. So we're moving from a Jubilee to a Jubilee from 70 years from the time of 1947 and all the stuff there and the timelines. And this is really a very, very interesting period of time. So this would not surprise me at all. In fact, I would have to say, I guess, it's right on time. And as you and I have spoken for a long time, we don't know exactly when Isaiah 17 will take place, but I think it's very, very soon. Then we have Daniel 8 and Ezekiel 38 and 39. And this is beginning to look very ominous to me. And we've known for some time that Turkey had to absolutely go into the camp of Russia. And he just said in that article, that's exactly what they've done. So this is a really telling prophetic fulfillment because Turkey is part of that, as is Persia, Iran, and I think Iraq is going to be included in that in spite of what it looks like right now. Bad news.
Yeah, and what's interesting, Stuart, is
go ahead.
Fact that I was just going to mention what's really interesting is the fact that we now have Russia making an alliance, a pact with Iran, which is really going to, I guess you could say, complicate the U.S. or anyone dealing with Iran, and at the same time, Turkey being in that pact, also being a NATO member. Where's the complications in that? Now, what's interesting, too, is the fact that today, you know, we reported, a day or so ago, we talked about Iran firing off a ballistic missile at the same time that there was some type of explosion, there in North Korea. And, of course, a lot of people said, well, that didn't happen. And then we reported another ballistic missile test fired by Iran. And, of course, the U.S. said, well, that didn't happen. But now they're having to back down from that because it's already been proven. It's proven now, and I put that up in my post today, that Iran's ballistic missile test did occur. And what's interesting also is the fact that that missile will go 2,000 kilometers within range and have multiple warheads, which it makes it a strategic threat to Israel. And I wanted to get your intake on this a little bit, too, is Yahoo News. Now, we're talking about media in the U.S., okay? I'm not trying to say this is coming from overseas. This is right here, but nobody's reading it. But it says, listen to this. Israel is going to war with Iran inside Syria, as Iran is now winning its proxy war for domination of the Middle East, as Netanyahu has been warning the world. And so, you remember the last few months I've been telling that people within Israel are being warned that they were going to war. And we all thought, well, it's war games, it's war drills, it's just more military drills of some kind. But, oh, no, it appears now that a lot of military has been moved and manipulated around Israel by their military to not only defend Israel, but it appears Israel is about to make a plunge to go to war in Syria. So this is really serious stuff, because if they do, they're coming against Syria, Russia, Iran, and even possibly Turkey.
Yeah, the war could start over there anytime, and with Atonement now coming up tomorrow, it's the last day, I guess, also of the sign of Jonah and the 40 days to repent, and there has been no repentance, not even a word about it. So that means if that sign is valid, and that's an if, we're going to get clobbered. We're going to get nailed. And war is probably one of those things that's going to happen. Moving on to Iran and how do I word this? You've got North Korea and Iran, both of whom have allies in China and Russia, right? Who's to say that they haven't been fed all kinds of weapons that we know nothing about? We are the sworn enemy of Russia, whether anybody wants to admit it or not. All you got to do is look in Ezekiel 38, 39. And Russia is our sworn enemy, and Russia is the one who probably with North Korea and a few others is the ones that are going to take us down. They're going to take us out. So, they keep saying, well, Iran just doesn't have that kind of capability yet. They're still working on it. I think that's pure baloney. And I think the same thing about North Korea. They have things we don't even know they have. And war is war, and according to what I can read in Jeremiah, Isaiah, Revelation, don't you think that this is nuclear-based? He talks about the missiles, fire their arrows with fire, and they have expert telemetry, and they hit their mark. Expert marksman, which means that the latest reports on Russia and their ability of expert telemetry, I would say that part of it's been fulfilled already. It's just a matter of who's going to push what button. But the Bible does talk about sudden destruction, and then comes all kinds of worldly, hurt. What do you think?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I know there is, a lot of people don't think North Korea has but one or two or three nukes, but most military intelligence indicates they may have as many as 60 nuclear weapons. And apparently they do have the capability of firing them, too. At the same time, what's interesting, or I found interesting today, and I shared that with you earlier, was the fact that the IAEA Director General is now warning that North Korean H-bomb is a new level of threat to the world. Well, doesn't that say that North Korea having an H-bomb is a new level of threat? So where's this theory that we keep hearing about, well, they probably don't really mean H-bomb, they mean a nuke. But on the other hand, I did post another deal today, too. Matter of fact, it was put out by Yahoo News. And here's what it says. It's very telling. It says a North Korean hydrogen bomb test in the Pacific could be devastating to the ocean and, get this, low orbiting satellites.
Oh, well, that's kind of interesting because EMP devices, nobody knows for sure, but those little satellites of Kimmy come up from the south and go across almost the mid part of America and then slightly over to the east on another orbit. And if those really are EMP devices, which they claim they could well be, if they were triggered, we're in a lot of trouble. In fact, we're toast. We're going down. What do you think on that? I really do believe we're on the brink. We're really on the brink of sudden destruction.
Well, I find it rather telling that while we're on the brink of sudden destruction, as you well put it, almost all of America is consumed with football, and not even real football. They're consumed with, I guess you could say, communist antics on the football field. You know, it's you know, I don't even have a good way to put it, what's going on in America right now. It's almost like America simply has a death wish, and that's all you can say. America is consumed with its little gods and its stupidity and trying to promote its leftist, communist coup against the Trump administration, and that's also the same. It's a slow-moving coup by the deep state, but it's still a coup. And so we're busy trying to uproot probably the only president that would defend us, because I suppose we don't want any defense, but apparently you say biblically we get hit anyway.
Yeah, we do. America's going down. I've caught tons of flack for years because I went by what the Bible says about America. Number one, being Babylon. It's a given. Doesn't matter how much denial tea people want to drink to deny it. The phraseology of the Scripture in Isaiah, Jeremiah, and elsewhere proves that America is Babylon, and proves that Babylon comes to a very sudden, unexpected end. And at the end of it all, America is no more. It's past history. So we have a lot of enemies, and we've made those enemies, and they are going to strike. And I do believe that, Major Ed Dames talks about this, I don't know if he meant underground explosion or underground use of a nuke with Kim, the whiz kid, or he says it's an anger, and he also says it's a precursor to the kill shot series of CMEs. And we've already had a precursor example of exactly what he was talking about when the sun kept spitting out all of these M-class and X-class flares over and over and over again. That's exactly what he said was a precursor to war. So we've already seen some of that, and when you look at all the threats that Kim has made and all the threats that Trump has made, I look at those as kind of precursor warnings of major war. What do you think? I think we're on the verge of a very sudden, unexpected war somewhere.
Yeah, and interestingly, I had someone from Wyoming, I believe it was, sent me an email this evening, and he said that he got curious about the sun because it seemed so bright, and he got his eclipse glasses out and put them over the end of his binoculars and got out there and looked at the sun, and he emailed me and said, "Is that sunspots I see facing Earth?" And so I got on spaceweather.com, and I hadn't had time to answer him yet, but I'll answer him on this show. Wyoming, I actually looked at the images of spaceweather.com, and we have at least 3, if not more, sunspots in direct lineup with Earth right now. I mean, and the sun is still being bizarre. So, Ed Dame's kill shot series of events are not that far-fetched.
Well, with the sun setting not where it ought and rising sometimes where it ought not, we got the wobble of the Earth. And some folks have said that they see the sun. It's instantaneous, but it seems like a flash of light. Like the sun occasionally is acting strange, and it's casting out these little flashes of light. There was a guy on YouTube, and of course you don't know how to vet any of this stuff, but he claims if you watch very carefully, the sun is flickering. Let's put it that way. It's kind of flickering. So it's unstable. And, here we are at Atonement. Here we are at the end of Jonah's 40-day warning. And I think we're in for a big, big, big surprise. I'm not sure whether it's related to the rapture of the bride or not. It could well be. We might be having a year delay because of the delay of one day on trumpets and the sighting of the new moon. But we are definitely, however you want to look at it, we are headed into some really serious, serious trouble, particularly here in America. Go ahead.
Yeah, and at the same time, I was going to mention also over in Israel is a couple of strange events occurred in the last couple of days. The U.S. ambassador, the new one that Trump had appointed, David Friedman, to Israel, stood up and talked to the MKs over there, and he told them, he said, Israel's settlers, he said, are okay because settlements are a part of Israel. In other words, the settlements that everybody's, coming against Israel from the UN about are really Israeli territory, Well, immediately Washington, D.C. rebuffed their own envoy, David Friedman, for saying that, and are now saying that that's not correct, that Israel's settlements are a violation. So, Stuart, are we in the middle of this also, or, as Washington, whether deep state or whoever, are we literally trying to double-cross and betray Israel at the same time?
I believe so. I have always believed that the Bible teaches that Babylon, America, betrays Israel. And I also believe the UN is in the middle of this betrayal as well. And NATO appears to be the military arm of the New World Order. And I believe that it's NATO who is going to go in after some conflicts to bring peace. Now, I don't know exactly who's going to be in the middle of all this, but it would seem to me anyway, we have to have war, and then we have to have this peace treaty. Now, a lot of folks think that this treaty has to be signed, and that's what brings about Israel's tribulation period, but that's not really what Daniel says. What Daniel says is that a peace treaty will be brought forward sometime during the early part of the tribulation period and will force or enforce an already existing treaty. I don't know if that's the Oslo Accords or whether there's a treaty being worked out, hammered out, like Stan says, one of the 34 Islamic nations are kind of working out a peace agreement with Israel. It doesn't really matter. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to mention, I haven't heard this anywhere else, but I saw just before the show a headline and a short report from One America News, which usually is really pretty accurate news. And they were reporting, if true now, if this is true, and I want your opinion of what you think, they are saying that there appears to be a secret meeting set up between North Korean delegation and former presidential administration officials. Now, when former administration officials, does that mean Obama? Are we talking Obama here? Is there a meeting between Obama and some of his people in North Korea? And, of course, they're going to keep that secret. But apparently One America News has a flash on that, and it's leaking out just a little bit. What do you think? Is Obama about to step out on the world stage?
I believe he will. I really believe, and it's partly because a lot of Christians were told this is the man of lawlessness. And I had that dream, and I'm not telling anybody to believe it was from the Lord. Might have been my overactive imagination, but I was teaching prophecy, and in walked Obama, a big smile, very friendly, and I looked at him and I said, "You know you're Lucifer, don't you?" And he said, "Yes, I know." And that was the end of the dream. So
wow.
I think he does. I think he's coming back on the world scene. Now, I'm not sure exactly how this is going to work or when he's coming back, but he's definitely coming back, and you're probably right. Remember how he followed Trump around?
Oh, yeah.
You know, not very long ago, wherever he went, Obama would go and kind of heal the breach that Trump had made. And we have to remember that Barack Hussein Obama was given a Nobel Peace Prize. And remember, the Oslo Accords were from Oslo. So when you tie the two together, I don't know how this is going to work, and I know an awful lot of people don't believe that the Antichrist comes out of America, but Isaiah says that Lucifer is the king of Babylon. Well, we don't have kings, but I got a feeling once you have martial law, you have a king, you have a dictator, and we're headed in that direction. It'll probably be after a war, maybe after the rapture of the bride. I think this is all going to come down in a time, in a place that nobody expects, even tomorrow. Sudden destruction means everything is normal. Everything appears normal. There's no warning except for those watching. And boom, out of nowhere comes sudden destruction. That's really the very definition of it. Jesus warned that it was a snare. And he warned about a snare being for Babylon. And a snare, as you know, is, how do we say, sudden destruction for those that are caught in that snare. A snare is something that's invisible. You don't know it's there. And you walk into it, and boom, it's sprung. And this is why the Lord, I think, uses those phraseologies, a snare, sudden destruction. This thing is coming out of the blue. Unless you're really watching, you wouldn't suspect anything. Which is why I think the Lord does say that we better be watching closely. There's a reward for those watching. What do you think?
Yeah, I was kind of thinking as you was talking about that snare and all that sudden destruction, how that it's so intriguing about a tsunami, because everything appears normal, and then suddenly the water moves out to sea. And instead of running, most people go down, they walk down to the beach to look at the beach that doesn't have water anymore, not realizing that when it comes back, it's really, really going to be a lot different than it was sitting in the harbor.
Oh, absolutely. And only those who know what a tsunami does, those who have learned about it, are the ones who escape, but the rest of them don't. So, yeah, it's very, very interesting. And there are other, little clues about sudden destruction. You remember that video of it was a wedding over in Israel, and the wedding party were dancing, and all of a sudden, with no warning whatever, that floor gave away.
That's right.
Remember that? Sudden
I do remember that.
Yeah, sudden destruction. I think that's exactly what's going to happen here. And people are not ready. They're not prepared. The church is not ready. Church is not prepared at all. And in some ways, I guess, how do you prepare for such a terrible, in some ways, to the world anyway, sudden change of direction, which is what this is going to be. It's just sudden change of direction. And I think that a nuclear war is definitely in the cards. That's what I read anyway. Flaming missiles and nuclear mushroom clouds, which can also be, of course, volcanoes. And they're starting to light off. Have you heard any more on the earth changes, California?
Well, I noted today that there were some very anomalous earthquakes in New Mexico, which is kind of unusual. They're still having earthquake swarms offshore, in Northern California. That's where Stan was really concerned. He was concerned about that Ferndale, California offshore quaking that was going on. Well, it is still going on. Of course, we had another one in central Oklahoma today, and Texas had some earthquakes. So it's very odd. More than overseas earthquakes right now, America, especially the Ring of Fire region, volcanic-wise, and up through the West Coast and such, really, I guess we need to continue to watch that very closely, according to Stan.
Yeah, we're in the final phase of Earth changes, and possibly even, I believe, a pole shift. In fact, there could well be a partial pole shift, as one of the visions you had, a partial pole shift. We just don't know when it's going to occur. Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to mention real quick. There's a guy named Bill that sends me. He's in California, but he sends me alerts. He's very electromagnetic sensitive, and he can almost sense a earthquake. And he sent me an email today. Almost every time he's done this, within 2 or 3 days, there is a big earthquake. And he said there's a big one coming, and I got that today, and we're doing this Friday. So I'll be watching, but he is predicting a large earthquake in the next 2 or 3 days, possibly.
Well, there are those people who are very sensitive. Any final words?
Oh, I tell you what, people just keep a heads up this whole weekend and into the first of next week, because, wow, there's a lot of matches out there, and it wouldn't take but one strike to set this thing off. Yeah,
and there's one great big match that the Lord has. that may or may not occur. It's a high watch. So anyway, thanks a lot, folks, for listening, and thank you, Larry, for coming on. And hopefully everybody makes it through the weekend, and no nuclear wars have begun. Anyway, good night, folks.